In the hushed corridors of Forrester Creations, where every whispered secret can become tomorrow's headline and every alliance can shift like sand beneath the tides, an accusation has erupted that threatens to shatter not only reputations, but the fragile bonds of loyalty and love that hold this family and its associates together. Taylor Hayes, once the beloved designer-turned-psychologist whose elegant grace masked the turmoil of her own past, now finds herself at the center of a storm so fierce that it has driven her to flee across the Atlantic. Seeking refuge in the sunlit plazas of Europe, far from the glare of flashing cameras and the unforgiving scrutiny of the law. It all began when an old patient, his voice trembling with grief and rage, stepped forward to claim that during therapy sessions Taylor had encouraged him to experiment with illicit substances, a counsel he says led directly to his fatal overdose. The man's family, fueled by grief and a hunger for justice, secured an arrest warrant, and within hours, Taylor's name was synonymous with scandal in every headline and tabloid from Los Angeles to London. As the legal machinery churned toward an inevitable showdown, Taylor made the unthinkable decision to abandon her life here, the opulent mansion famously shared with Ridge, the network of friends and confidants she had woven around herself, the studio in which she once sketched designs destined for the runway. In the dead of night, she packed only the essentials, photographs of happier times with Ridge, a single suitcase brimming with her beloved journals, and slipped away, leaving behind a note of apology that conveyed both her sorrow and her desperation. The note found its way into Ridge's trembling hands the next morning, delivered by a silent courier, and its contents read like a manifesto of guilt and bewilderment. Taylor claimed innocence, insisted that her words had been misconstrued, that she had never advocated wrongdoing, yet acknowledged the terror of facing a jury and the peril of dragging Ridge and his family into the maelstrom. In the aftermath of her departure, Ridge Forrester was left reeling. A titan in the fashion world, accustomed to navigating business crises with steely resolve, he now faced the greatest trial of his life, the potential loss of the woman he loved, her career in tatters, her reputation irreparably stained, and the threat of incarceration hanging over her like a guillotine poised to fall. For days, he vacillated between outrage at the injustice of the allegation and grief at Taylor's choice to flee rather than stand and fight beside him. He reached out to the legal team, pooled every resource at his disposal, and scoured Europe for any sign of her, only to learn that she had vanished from the usual haunts of the jet-setting elite, leaving behind no forwarding address. Then, in a twist that nobody could have predicted, Brooke Logan, Taylor's erstwhile rival in love and business, stepped out of the shadows to offer an olive branch. Brooke, who had once considered Taylor the interloper in her own love story with Ridge, now declared a temporary truce, driven not by altruism, but by a shrewd calculation. If Ridge was to remain unencumbered by scandal, Taylor's name must be cleared. Brooke reached out to Ridge, her voice measured yet urgent, proposing an alliance forged in the crucible of crisis. She offered access to her own network of investigators and public relations experts, contacts who could unearth evidence to undermine the credibility of the accuser, to expose inconsistencies in his account, to produce witnesses who could testify that Taylor's therapy methods, though unconventional, never crossed the line into criminal encouragement. In return, Brooke demanded a concession that cut to the heart of Ridge's emotional turmoil. Taylor must, upon her exoneration, agree to withdraw from any romantic involvement with Ridge permanently. For a moment, Ridge recoiled at the audacity of the demand. How could Brooke, who had once battled Taylor for his affections, now present herself as the arbiter of his heart's fate? But as he weighed his options, the stakes became brutally clear. With Taylor abroad and her future uncertain, his own life, his company, his public standing, his children's sense of security was unraveling. If Brooke could deliver the exoneration Taylor so desperately needed, perhaps the pain of sacrificing one love for another conflict was a price worth paying to salvage everything else. Ridge, haunted by memories of happier times with Taylor, their whispered promises in olive groves, the late-night conversations in her Parisian apartment, the way she had once wept tears of pride when he unveiled his tribute line to her, nevertheless agreed to Brooke's terms. Brooke immediately set her team in motion. Her private detective, a grizzled veteran of high-profile cases, flew to Switzerland to interview mutual acquaintances of the patient, tracking down former colleagues who could attest to his history of substance abuse long before he ever sought Taylor's counsel. Meanwhile, a crisis management firm in London compiled a dossier of Taylor's professional ethics, her certifications, and testimonials from satisfied clients. Each narrative meticulously crafted to showcase her integrity and undermine the accuser's motive for money or revenge. Within days, leaks began to surface. Anonymous sources close to the accuser admitted that he had been under investigation for insurance fraud, that he had gambled away settlement funds, that his desperation for a payday might have fueled a malicious accusation. Television networks ran exposés questioning the timing of the claim. Why now, after years of silence? Social media buzzed with the hashtag Justice for Taylor, as fans of the show and fervent supporters of her character rallied to her defense. Back in Los Angeles, Ridge monitored every development, torn between relief and guilt. Each new revelation that chipped away at the prosecution's case felt like a nail in the coffin of his romance with Taylor. He found himself drafting letters to her, letters he would never send. Confessing his hopes that she would understand his choice, that someday she might forgive him, that he would carry the memory of their love like a precious talisman even as he built a new life unburdened by scandal. Brooke, for her part, maintained a public facade of decorum, issuing statements to the press that emphasized her friendship with both Ridge and Taylor, her commitment to truth, and her sorrow at the turmoil that had engulfed them. Behind closed doors, she celebrated each minor victory, a retweet here, a sympathetic op-ed there, as evidence that her gambit was working. Weeks passed, and the tide continued to turn in Taylor's favor. A key witness recanted her testimony, admitting she had been coached by the accuser's counsel. Medical records unearthed in a dusty archive revealed that the patient's fatal overdose was actually caused by a combination of legal painkillers prescribed after a car accident. Substances Taylor had never discussed in her sessions with him. Finally, the district attorney, faced with the prospect of a high-profile trial and the very real possibility of an embarrassing defeat, dropped the charges. A terse press release announced that the case was dismissed in the interest of justice, a phrase so antiseptic it barely masked the relief coursing through Taylor's circle of supporters. In the moment that the news broke, Ridge felt a rush of triumph and a pang of remorse sharper than any blade. He had won the battle for Taylor's freedom, but at the cost of silencing the voice of his heart's deepest desire. He drafted a brief statement, read it publicly, praising the legal system and thanking all who had worked tirelessly to clear Taylor's name. He said nothing of the agreement that had set the terms for this victory, nothing of the void that would forever linger where their shared dreams once flourished. Meanwhile, in a sun-dappled cafe in the south of France, Taylor received the news. She read the terse email from her attorney on her tablet, her fingers trembling as tears sprang to her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope, a fragile, shimmering thread that reminded her why she had fallen in love with Ridge in the first place, his fierce loyalty, his willingness to sacrifice everything for her. Yet, when she thought of the promise she would now be expected to keep, to relinquish her claim on their love, to consign her memories of their life together to the past, her heart constricted with anguish. Brooke watched from afar, a self-satisfied smile playing at her lips. She had orchestrated a restoration of Taylor's reputation, neutralized her rival's claim on Ridge, and reaffirmed her own position at the center of the Forrester universe. The alliance she had proposed had delivered everything she intended it to, and the world would never know that beneath her veneer of compassion lay a strategist who had engineered a victory as ruthless as it was effective. As the sun set over the Cobalt Sea, Taylor closed her journal and stared out at the shimmering horizon. She thought of Ridge, of Brooke, of the winding paths that had brought her to this moment of both liberation and loss. And in that instant, she understood with crystalline clarity that her journey was far from over, and that the story of her heart was still being written, one chapter at a time, in the spaces between accusation and exoneration, between betrayal and forgiveness, between love lost and love reclaimed. As twilight deepened over the cobalt Mediterranean, Taylor folded her tablet and rose from the wrought iron cafe table, the gentle hum of French conversation washing over her like distant waves. She had time to savor freedom, but the cost of her exoneration weighed on her like a shadow eclipsing the sun. She thought of Ridge's carefully crafted public statement, how he praised the legal system while remaining silent about their personal pact, and she felt a simmering resolve ignite within her. No longer would she be a pawn in Brooke's design or a casualty of headlines. If constraining her love was the price for her name's restoration, she would pay it, but only on her own terms. With each step along the promenade, Taylor's mind mapped a new course: return to Los Angeles, reclaim her practice, and challenge the understanding that a woman's worth lay solely in her capacity to sacrifice love at another's behest. Back in Los Angeles, Brooke sat in the glass-walled conference room of Logan Media, watching the skyline darken as the latest ratings for the Justice for Taylor campaign flashed across her laptop screen. The metrics glowed green, evidence that the public had embraced her crusade, but beneath that triumph lurked an unexpected disquiet. Ridge had thanked her effusively, praised her loyalty, and yet an unspoken tension pulsed between them. He had asked about Taylor's well-being in private calls, his voice soft with guilt, and Brooke had deflected, insisting that this was never about personal vendettas, but about upholding truth. Yet each time Ridge's concern slipped into emotion, she felt a pang. Not for Taylor, but for the tenuous hold she had on Ridge's heart. Her victory now felt precarious, as though the very force that had cleared Taylor's name might also reignite the flames between Taylor and Ridge. Unbeknownst to Brooke, Ridge was acting on silent impulses of his own. He had instructed his assistant to secure a private jet for Taylor's return, no announcement, no fanfare, just a simple journey home. He had spent evenings drafting letters he would never post, letters in which he laid bare the turmoil of his soul, how he missed Taylor's laughter, her measured counsel, the way her eyes lit up when she saw his designs draped on a runway model. He wondered whether he had been right to sacrifice their relationship for the sake of reputation, or if he had unwittingly surrendered the very thing that had defined him outside the confines of a boardroom. Meanwhile, the Forrester board was restless. Investors murmured over coffee that the scandal, though dismissed, had revealed cracks in the brand's image. Ridge's looming decision, to welcome Taylor back into his life or to solidify his alliance with Brooke, threatened to tilt the scales of power within the company. Taylor's flight landed under the cover of night. She stepped onto the tarmac in LAX with a single carry-on and a heart bristling with purpose. No press caravan greeted her, no cameras lit up her arrival. For the first time in weeks, she felt the pulse of her own agency beating beneath her ribs. As she cleared customs, she sensed a watchful presence and turned to see Ridge waiting by the exit, clad in a simple wool coat, his expression a blend of relief and sorrow. He took a hesitant step forward, then paused, as though measuring the distance between them. Taylor met his gaze, her shoulders squared. In the hush of the airport corridor, they stood as two unlikely warriors in the aftermath of battle, their scars laid bare for only the other to see. "I heard you came back quietly," Ridge said, his voice low. "I wanted to give you space." Taylor inhaled, steeling herself. "I needed to see for myself where I fit in this life I left behind." He swallowed, and the ghost of a plea flickered across his eyes. "Brooke's campaign, it saved you, but it also set terms. You know that, right?" Taylor raised a hand, cutting through his words. "I know the price," she asked. "And I know you agreed. But you should know that I won't be bound by her or by anyone else's conditions." Ridge looked away, jaw clenched. "Brooke has been a friend to both of us. She did what needed to be done." "Friendship at the cost of my happiness is no kindness," Taylor replied, her tone resolute yet tinged with vulnerability. "I came back to rebuild my life, not to appease old rivalries. I want my practice, my clients, my designs, and I want to do it on my own terms. As for us," she inhaled, feeling conviction steady her voice. "We'll have to decide if our love can survive outside the confines of that agreement." Behind them, the airport lights flickered and a gust of cool air swept through. Ridge reached for Taylor's hand, his fingers brushing hers with a tenderness that spoke of shared history, of laughter beneath Californian skies, of midnight conversations in Parisian alleys. He closed his eyes and pressed their palms together. "I've missed you," he admitted. "And I'm sorry for what I asked." Taylor's eyes glowed with unshed tears. "Then let's start over, not as Brooke's allies, not as pawns in a game, but as ourselves. Whatever that looks like." In that moment, the noise of the airport faded and the world contracted to the space between them. Two souls, battle-worn but unbroken, poised on the threshold of a new chapter. Beyond the glass doors lay the city that had tested them, torn them apart, and now beckoned them to reclaim their agency, their love, and their destiny. Meanwhile, back in Santa Barbara, Brooke received the news of Taylor's return via a terse text from Ridge. "Taylor's back. Let's meet tomorrow." For the first time, her victory felt incomplete. She stared at the screen, the triumphant metrics of her media campaign suddenly hollow. She realized that in orchestrating Taylor's exoneration, she had unleashed forces neither of them could fully control. The power struggle she had engineered now threatened to unravel the very alliances she had fortified. As dawn approached over Malibu, Ridge and Taylor emerged from the airport and drove in silence toward the Forrester estate. Each turn of the wheel carried them further from the chaos of the past and closer to a future ripe with uncertainty and possibility. They passed a billboard advertising the upcoming Forrester Couture show, its models draped in Taylor's boldest designs yet. A spark lit in Taylor's eyes. She would reclaim her creative voice, harness her experiences of betrayal and redemption, and transform them into art that spoke to resilience and hope. Ridge reached over and brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. "Let's make our own rules," he whispered. Taylor nodded, a soft smile curving her lips. "Starting now." And so, as the sun crested the Pacific horizon, bathing the city in gold, Taylor and Ridge set their course not as adversaries bound by obligation, but as partners united by love renewed, ready to write the next act of their story free from scandal, free from compromise, and free to define their own destiny together.